Good morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We certainly have a personality and some perspectives with us this morning. As usual, we like to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. And I'm going to go be very direct this morning. I'm going to make our kudos this morning to a lady from Ameren, our energy provider here in Central Illinois. A young lady named Marceline Love, who is a lady who put me in contact with our guest this morning. And she's been very courteous and very helpful to me via the internet. And so I doff my aviator's hat to Ms. Marceline Loyd. Let's go right ahead, Mr. Kirby, and introduce our guest this morning. He's come a long way.
He has come a long way from, I guess, south of us. Mr. Peter Millburg is with us. He is the Senior Manager for Regulatory Compliance with Ameren, Illinois.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us in the cornfields here.
Oh, glad to be here. It's a beautiful morning. It's a great day to be here. So thank you. Appreciate it. And you're right about Marceline. Marceline's a rock star. She was
right on the ball. She answered me promptly. And that's things that old people like.
Everyone likes that. Yeah.
That's exactly right. In my initial inquiries, sir, I had kind of in mind to try to find out about how sites are acquired. But I'm indicated that that's not our area of responsibility here this morning. Mm-hmm. But I've always been curious, and perhaps you have shed some light on it. They obviously make a study somewhere along the line to decide they're going to put X number of turbines in an area, in a geographic area. And here it appears to be from somewhere east in the Indiana line. It kind of follows I-10 across the way, all the way over to Havana. I presume that's where they stop, or maybe they go over into Iowa from there. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But do you have any idea how they make their studies, Mr. Millburg?
Sure. And I base this off of there's a department up at Illinois State University called the Department of Regulatory Policy and Studies. And they were one of the leaders in research on renewable power going back a decade at least. Dr. David Loomis heads the program. I understand he'll be he may be retiring soon. He's done a great job up there. But when you look at Illinois, there's a lot of it, and so much of it for the wind farms is topography, because you got to put these turbines where the wind blows, right? So based on what I recall reading from his studies, when you look, it's really from central Illinois on up north is favorable for the development and support of wind turbine technology. And really beyond that, then it comes down to these developers looking to see what the markets need. It's just like any other private business. See what's needed out there with regard to renewable power, with regard to energy supply. And then the other thing that they look for typically is where there are those electric transmission lines. And we're talking those big lines that run on towers through the country, right? We're not talking about the stuff that runs down people's street. We're talking about all those big, H structures, the big, things that look like big Ys, or, as a kid, you look at them like, oh, you can imagine robots, walking through the fields. Because that's how they get the power to market. For that much electric energy being produced, you have to have a line stiff enough or strong enough or big enough, frankly, to be able to carry the power that's going to be pushing into the grid. So that's, again, it's topography. So you have good wind, and then it's proximity to the transmission line, because you don't want to have to build miles and miles of line to interconnect to a transmission line. And then the other thing you have is it gets into markets. Here in Illinois, we're part of something called the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator System. And this is an organization, it's at the federal level, that helps ensure that reliability and fair and open markets. ComEd, the utility in Chicago, is part of a reliability organization called PJM, and that runs more out east. And so if these developers are looking to sell product into the eastern markets, they'll try to find a site that provides them with an interconnection to a ComEd transmission line. If they're wanting to serve the Midwest market, they'll look for something that connects to an Ameren, Illinois line in this area of the state. So a whole lot of factors come into play. I don't know anything about the markets, how they size the market, when the opportunity is right, but that's the basic factors I understand from a siting perspective.
I noticed if you drive to Springfield on either side of the road as you go south, we got pretty good sized solar farms just south of Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I noticed also, I mentioned this to Jim last week, there's a big solar farm on South Kickapoo Street as you go down to Lincoln Lakes on your left side there in the agricultural ground. Does Ameren have an affinity for either type of energy? It's whatever produces the cheapest megawatt, I guess.
Well, and keep in mind that we're a delivery company, right? So we're not in the market side of this.
Yes.
So when we look at facilities like that, whether the solar facilities or the wind facilities, we're looking at it from a technical perspective. How can we make that facility, how can we interconnect that facility to our system without creating reliability problems or safety issues? So that's our role, primary role when we look at facilities like that, is how can we help enable that physical interconnection? And we're evolving as the industry is evolving. We are now more engaged with developers and are providing more information to them to help them right-size their facilities, because sometimes if they build it too big, we have to do a lot of work on our distribution system to support it. That's expensive. That adds to the cost of the project. Or sometimes if they can back off the size a little bit, or maybe pick a different site, a different line, they can still build what they want to build and not incur those costs to upgrade our distribution facilities, or that we call it, the smaller lines, to support their operation. So yeah, from our perspective, we're indifferent. We don't care what the power source is, just like we don't care where people buy their power. It's just you get the power in there, we'll deliver it. Our responsibility is to make sure that system operates reliably and safely.
Yeah, so I noticed doing some research before that Ameren, Missouri announced a planned acquisition of a solar facility, a 200 megawatt facility in central Missouri. So that there was sort of a feasibility study, I guess, for lack of a better term, to decide how that would fit in with your grid and delivery system and so forth.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Ameren, Missouri is in a totally different regulatory structure than Ameren, Illinois. In Illinois, we're deregulated or restructured, they call it, to where the investor-owned utilities, and some of your listeners may recall SILCO and CIPS and Illinois Power. Well, back in the late 1990s, deregulation came, and so we were told, get rid of your power plants. We don't want you in the business of generating power anymore. So we sold the power plants, and we became what we are today, a wires company. Ameren, Missouri is still vertically integrated. Nice. So all the way from power generation to the meters on people's houses, that's all part of that utility. And Ameren, Missouri has announced, their intention to go with total renewable power, and I don't quote me on this, but I think it's somewhere around 2050, something like that. And so they are already doing things like developing and buying wind farms and developing and buying solar farms and doing much the same siting criteria as what we talked about, because again, you want to put these things at places where it makes sense economically, where it makes sense also from an electric reliability perspective. And that's where you'll hear some talk now about like storage, batteries basically, and large battery farms being placed, out on the grid. Well, what they're able to do with those is place them at locations where you need that power injected at key times. So with the solar farms and things like that, if the Ameren, Missouri, from what I understand, includes criteria like that in terms of where they site those facilities. Will it help the grid if we put it here, in addition to getting that renewable power in to replace the fossil fuel generation?
Viewpoint needs power too, and that's called with our supporters, our advertisers.
Our sponsors?
Yes.
So we'll take a few minutes and let the sponsors power up here.
That works.
Right, back live in the studios here, station WLCN 96.3 on your dial. Our guest this morning on Viewpoint is Mr. Peter Millburg, representing Ameren. They're the folks that power you up, keep you cool at night and warm during the day. Peter is very kindly offered to come over here and share his knowledge, and Lord knows I need a lot of help on this. I'm in over my head this morning, way over my head. We're talking about wind power and solar power. Mm-hmm. And all we know is that turns on the lights. And beyond that, there we are. So We were talking off air that we have some farm friends that have wind powers on their farms, and you indicated way back that all farms had windmills, and people hooked them up to generators way back then.
Mm-hmm.
That's just right after Ohms decided what's law was law.
Voltage equals current times resistance.
I'm thinking out loud here, which is a real problem I have once in a while. In a city, in a small community, even like Lincoln, you're not going to see many wind towers.
Correct.
But you're beginning to see solar panels on roofs.
Absolutely.
And is that I'm sure it's initially a pretty good outlay of money. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how long does it take to pay out?
Sure.
So what are your comments about roof solar panels, sir?
Yeah, sure. And you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously in a community, you don't want to have a lot of wind turbines up. There is some noise associated with the flicker, things like that. And so that's why in a community like Lincoln, Atlanta, the areas like where we live, you're going to see a lot of solar on roofs. And the state of Illinois is encouraging that. I mean, encouraging in a big way. Now, I started working, and the state first formalized its interconnection rules for distributed generation and its net metering policies back in 2006. And I joined the regulatory group in 2008 when the legislation got passed and we had to put the rules into place of how to implement all this. And back then, the state relied on tax incentives, and when and we would see it in our applications. We'd see a spike in applications, tax incentives run out, they drop down. And from 2008 till about 2016, we had only 500 applications, or interconnections, of things like rooftop solar, or even small turbines throughout our territory. We serve 43,000 square miles in the state, right? Figure everything south of I-80, except for the co-ops, we pretty much serve 500 interconnections. Well, the state in 2015, they experimented with the program on something called renewable energy credits. And it's a common concept within the renewable energy industry. And what it is, it's a certificate that says 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity has been generated by a generator using a renewable fuel source, solar, wind, maybe some sort of fuel source that is, a renewable. And they saw that that there was a very good interest in that and a very good adoption rate in some facilities built out, renewable generation built out. So in 2016, they passed a law called FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act, and what that did was that took that concept and really turned it into scale, put it at something at large scale, and so these incentives that we were talking about, that's what FEJA did. It turned on the incentives to help make that initial installation cost, much less, and also make the lifetime of the system, much more productive and economically attractive. And the state's been tweaking this as it's gone along, right? They are learning and they are taking input from entities like us about what the proper amount of incentive should be. But to give you some idea of how effective those incentives are, we went from 500 facilities interconnected in 2016. 2017, FEJA went into effect, and between 2017 and 2021, 7,000 rooftop units basically went and got installed. And the way the incentives that are out there for someone to own and install this is one of these renewable energy credits. Because the way the program works is we take the first 15 years of production for a solar facility and a wind, but mostly it's solar that's going in right now, and you can project what it's going to produce. You know how much sunshine we typically get. I mean, there's studies and years of data on that. So you take that first 15 years of operation and figure out how many RECs it's going to produce. Then there's a state agency called the Illinois Power Agency, and they set a price for those RECs. And the utilities have to buy RECs at that price for everything that gets installed. So if you put one of these units on your house, you'll get from us that very first year a check for 15 years worth of production. Now the kicker is you need to make sure that you produce all 15 years, which means if there's hail damage, something like that, you get it repaired, replaced, that sort of thing. So that's one incentive. Second incentive coming into play now for residential customers, and this wasn't available until this legislation last fall got passed, is a rebate for the inverter that's used in these installations. So an inverter is a device that takes the DC power that's produced by those solar panels and turns it into AC power, which is what our system operates on. And that's how you can link those two together. And so there's going to be an incentive available for residential customers for that piece of equipment that they have to make this operate. That's also payable up front. So once they install it, customers will send us an application and we'll, write them a check. We have, I believe the law says we have a maximum of 60 days to write the check. We've been getting them out the door much faster than that. So that's two sources of upfront money that, customers can get for this. A third way to monetize it then is the federal government offers an investment tax credit. It's right now, I don't recall the exact amount, but I think it's somewhere around 24%, and that's a tax credit. Okay, that's a reduction of taxes. It's not a reduction of of your income that's used to calculate taxes. That's straight out a reduction of taxes at the federal level. And you need to talk to an accountant, because if you don't have enough income, I think you can carry credits forward. But again, I'm a political science major. I don't do accounting, so talk to an accountant on that. So that's the third way. The fourth way you get a return off of your investment is through your reduced energy usage. Right, you're pulling less in off of our system, so that means you're paying us less money. And then the other thing is if you set up your service on something called net metering, you're going to have months where you're going to push more power out into the system, because there's months like February where the sun doesn't shine that much, right? And so you're going to be pulling more power off the system to make sure your home gets heated and lights go on. And so what net metering does is we serve as the battery and the bank for people with these facilities. We automatically track how much is put into our system. If it's more than what you use, we take that excess generation and we keep track of it. We put it in a bank account basically for you. And we say, okay, you had 500 kilowatt hours more this month produced than you used. We'll put that. Next month comes, and say it's a month where the sun didn't shine very much, and you end up needing you produce, say, 350 kilowatt hours less than what you pull off our system. Well, we look and say, hey, you got this bank of 500 kilowatt hours. We'll just pull that extra 350 out of that bank. You still got 150 kilowatt hours left in your bank. We reduce your bill this month. You're basically show no usage from a billing perspective. So that's how you monetize these solar panels on your roof. There's the upfront money through the RECs, through the rebate, which RECs and the rebates. You'll get a federal investment tax credit if you own the unit, and then you get the net metering. You get that reduction in just your overall usage, and then we'll operate as the bank for you and keep track of anything excess you put in the grid for those months when you're a little shy.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Ameren's representative, Mr. Peter Millburg, who lost me between megawatts and kilowatts.
You were trying to figure out Ohm's law, so
yeah, I never could remember Ohm's law, so what am I doing sitting here talking to this esoteric conversation?
But in a way, you touch on something that's important, and you said something like you don't understand it. It's just basically you want to flick the light switch and have it come on. Mm-hmm. That's our goal too, right? We don't want you to have to worry about and think about, okay, it's hey, it's 8:30 in the morning, I need to go flip something on to get power. You don't have to do that, but that's part of where the grid is going now, and where the governments want to take it. It's something where people have the opportunity, people and businesses have the opportunity to be much more interactive and be able to do things like reduce their power at peak times and then have us pay for that. That's not a new concept, right? But they want to see that done at scale. They want to see that done not just in our territory, but like throughout the entire Midwest, and have firms aggregate all those customers together into big selling pools, basically, and to dump all that extra capacity into the system by people willing to say, hey, I'll turn my thermostat up to 80 degrees for a few hours this afternoon. Not a big deal. Especially if you're not home, it's like, oh yeah, I'll kick it up there. So we do want people not to have to worry about things like reliability and safety. I mean, that's our job, and we take it very seriously, and We put a lot of money, a lot of effort into it, a lot of sweat. But now there'll be the opportunity to say, okay, since you don't have to worry about reliability, how can you monetize investments you make in things like solar panels, in things like smart thermostats, which help you from an energy efficiency perspective, but also allow you the opportunity to participate in some of these new markets that are going to be coming about. So it's a new world coming. So.
Yeah. So with all those different technologies and different agencies, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and so forth, and all the rules and regulations, you are, as we mentioned, the regulatory compliance senior manager. How do you keep track of what you have to keep track of?
Well, keep in mind the company was operating before I got here, and we have a staff. It's obviously our regulatory team is larger than me. We have a staff that works on. We basically look at it from two perspectives. We have a policy side of the regulatory house, and then we have a rates and analysis side. And between the policy side are government lobbyists, who try to keep abreast of what legislation's coming, and then the rates and analysis team that looks at what our costs are and what opportunities we have to try and hold costs down and how to make sure that we get rates put in place that allow us to recover costs but don't impact customers so much. There's a large team of individuals involved, and we were talking before we came on the air about. California, and are we? What lessons can we learn from there? There's a lot of that goes on too. There are utility industry association groups like the Edison Electric Institute, where you get together with other utilities and you talk about different programs and different trends emerging and how you respond and what opportunities that provides for your customers. And the whole goal behind that is to try and learn from everyone's experiences. I was joking about, I've got a few knots on my head from just things that at the time we thought, this is the way to do it, this is the way to implement it. And things like with deregulation, and things that we thought we needed to help protect our customers from, and things that we thought we need to do. And looking back on it now, I just shake my head and go like, why did we ever worry about that? And so that's the challenge. Is you try to learn from others' experiences. I'm not going to say mistakes, experiences. Try not to repeat them, because you want this all to work. You want this, we want to have it to where our system is reliable, it's safe, and that customers have the opportunity to participate in some of these markets, because that's a great thing for our economy. If they're able to participate in these markets and get paid for it, that brings money into central Illinois, and downstate Illinois. That's a good thing. So how can we, do the basics thing of keeping the system running while enable people to have the opportunity to participate in those markets and make that money? That's the new challenge we see in dealing, and that's where, we have a team. It takes a team to see what's going on at the federal level, see what's going on at the state level, see what's going on at different places in the country, and how can we adapt and build off of that.
648-5510. Our guest, Mr. Peter Millburg, who has a Webster's Unabridged Encyclopedia on Energy. And he will be glad to share that with you. Don't be intimidated by the fact that this guy is really smart. No, seriously, we appreciate your taking your time, because we drive around the street and we know about these wind powers because we see them more than the turbines than we do the solar panels. Mm-hmm. But they're both here to stay.
Yes.
And go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to say, and one of the things that sometimes people think that it can't be that easy. There's got to be a catch to it, or the money's just not. That money can't be there, and it is, and that's part of one of the reasons why I was. We were so glad that you reached out to us so we'd have this opportunity. We have a team set up that works with customers and developers that are doing interconnections. That's all they do. They focus on that, and we have a hybrid approach. We have a automated system for the applications that are like high volume, high number, but really low impact. That's most of the residential applications. But we also have people that will talk to people. It's like one of the most effective communications tools is talking, and so we try to help people get their questions answered. We try to help them take advantage of these new technologies, the solar panels and the wind panels. Again, our job. We want to enable the state's goals. We want to enable our customers to start developing renewable energy at their homes, at their farms, at their businesses. And that's through things like, that team I talked about, just set up, working with them. We have a hosting map on our website now that shows sites that can handle generation with a minimum of facility upgrades. You go out to our AmerenIllinois.com website, type in hosting map, and it'll take you, there. And what it does is, whether depending on what size of generation you're looking at putting in, you can type in your address and see. And thankfully for people like me, it's color coded. Green is good. You can build up to 5 megawatts of generation at a green site. If it's red, maybe you want to rethink. If you can move the location, maybe you want to rethink it, or know that you'll need to work with us on what size of generation to put there. So there are tools like that out there that we're developing and making available to customers to try to help them see it can be that easy. And I heard, as we were talking during break, there's someone locally here who installs solar panels. And if you want to know how doable it is, if you're out on your walks with your neighborhoods, out on a walk with your dogs, you see someone with solar panels and they're out, talk to them, ask them who they use, ask them how satisfied they are with it, what they found from it. All the installers have to be certified by the state of Illinois. So they've got a number that, it's ICC, Illinois Commerce Commission, issues them. So talk to people in your communities, talk to the electricians who work with these installers. They can tell you who's active, and then you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking at it. How would you set this up? What would I pay? When would I pay it? It is that easy. And there are monies available, significant amounts of money available to help defray the cost of installing renewable generation at your home or business.
I presume it varies from city to city, but you probably have to have city permission to put up a turbine because you're erecting a tower there in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And now at Ameren, they advise, you're giving excellent advice to talk to the actual customers, people who you see a solar panel on a roof. Does Ameren in a position to give people advice over the telephone or via email or common ordinary letter?
Well, what we do is we don't advise them on what technologies to use or whether they should or shouldn't do something like that. We can advise them on things like how to learn about renewable power. So we have a website where we try to educate. There are links to, like, Illinois Power Agency, for example, is a great resource, and it's Illinois Power Agency, or IPA. They are charged with consumer protection related to renewable energy. So the IPA has a great section on their website about the how-tos and the what to look for if you're looking at putting solar on your roof. And so we can't really advise per se. We have to be neutral. We're just the wires company trying to make it happen. But there are resources out there people can access, whether it's the Illinois Power Agency site or their friends and neighbors in the community, to learn about what was your experience like. You're absolutely right in terms of local ordinances and local building codes. And yeah, I understand most communities don't like wind turbines being put up. So always, regardless of the project, work with the local building inspectors, work with their local code folks. They know how to do it right and help keep you safe.
And speaking of working with, I certainly assume that Ameren has a good lobbyist who are in constant contact with our legislators. Mm-hmm. By the way, we've got some real good ones here in Central Illinois. Mm-hmm. We had Tim Butler as a representative, and we lost him due to gerrymandering. Mm-hmm. Now we have Dr. Bill Howder, who's going to take his position. Mm-hmm. We have an excellent state senator in Sally Turner here. Those people are receptive to common sense communications. Mm-hmm. And I use the word common sense advisory there because they could spot a phone in a minute. So I'm assuming that the great company of Ameren, they've got lobbyists in all the legislative areas.
Yeah, when you look at our operations, I mean, we're a heavily regulated utility. We're heavily regulated operation, federal level, state level, all the normal regulations that apply to any business, OSHA, et cetera. And then you layer on top of that, the requirement that these agencies set our prices and set our operational practices. So we try to make sure that we understand what's coming, from these entities, try to help shape policy where we can. And for example, this, one of the things that we are active in is we want to make sure that when the state looks at energy policy, they consider the needs of downstate Illinois, and that, we're out there talking with legislators, trying to help them understand how legislation might impact affordability for our customers, how it might impact reliability. Again, we want to make sure that this transition to renewable power is done in a measured fashion so that, no one has to be concerned about reliability. And so we do communicate with legislators like anyone else. Any individual or any business has the right to talk with your legislators. We do try to serve as an information resource to help them understand the impact of varying pieces of legislation on their constituents, on the affordability for the constituents, for electric service and gas service. So yeah, we are engaged trying to help shape good energy policy for our customers and for our service territory. Again, we're only as good and strong as the economy in our service territory. So that's one of the reasons why we're out involved in communicating with government officials.
This morning our guest is Peter Millburg, and he represents the people that keep you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Basically, your power source, Ameren. Mm-hmm. We've been very, very gracious to come and visit with us about this wind versus solar energy. And it's so technical that I'm sitting here wondering why I'd ever invited this guest here. But I thought that our listeners were aware of solar and turbine power, and there's a distinct difference for each one of them. Mm-hmm. One will work on your place where another one may not work.
Absolutely, and that's part of you mentioned working with local building inspectors and zoning officials. Do your research there. Solar is typically fine. Solar on roof is typically fine. You may want to check if you want to put solar on a panel in your yard. Something like that. Because I don't know how zoning treats that. Wind turbines, that was kind of a hot button issue going back to the early days in the 2010-ish area time frame, for local communities. But whether you're in town, in the country, just find out first what you can do. From what I understand, most municipalities and counties are supportive of renewable power. And it's just like any other thing you want to build. Make sure that it's not going to intrude on your neighbors. And certainly a solar panel is very passive. You put it on your roof, you put it on panels in your yard or on a farm, and it generally is very acceptable by all stakeholders. And one of the other things I wanted to touch on too, while I was thinking about it, is we've been talking about people putting solar on their roofs, right, on their properties. But there are a lot of people that don't own where they live. They rent the house, they rent the apartment, or maybe they're on a house that's in a heavily wooded area, or the roof just is pointing the wrong direction, or is whatever, can't support it. There's a concept called community solar out there, where there are these entities that build these very large solar farms, not utility scale. And I'm sorry, I don't know if some of the facilities around Lincoln, for example, are community solar facilities, but that's the type of facilities that get built. And then the developers will offer subscriptions for a certain amount of capacity from that facility. And so whatever that facility generates, you get that percentage of output applied to your bill, applied to your account. And it's a very easy process. You contract with the developer. You arrange whatever subscription price they have for you. The developer goes into one of the tools we have set up for them and says, hey, Bill has signed up for 4 kW of capacity from my facility. We get that into our system, and literally the next day we start putting that onto your account. And so It's a way for people that don't own their houses or can't put solar on their houses or on their property to still help support renewable energy and also hopefully get cheaper power than what they can get just by buying it through Ameren or through one of the 30-odd suppliers we have working on our territory.
You've been talking, mentioned a few times about how Ameren is sort of the wires company
Yeah.
in terms of getting energy to your place. We've been talking about renewable energy and so forth. Electric cars have certainly been in the news lately. So obviously Ameren isn't in the electric car business per se, but in terms of getting energy to charging stations and so forth, I'm sure that's a hot topic of discussion around the office.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. We support electrification of transportation, basically EVs. Since we're a utility, we have to put the longer term on it and throw an acronym on it as well. So, we, like you said, we don't own the vehicles, we don't own the charging stations, but we're going to make sure that the system is robust enough to support it. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to work with stakeholders like the Commerce Commission and the legislature to help set up incentives to motivate people to charge at the best times of day. And I heard the story on your news driving in this morning about someone expressing concern about the grid not being able to handle all the EVs and all the charging. And I think a good analogy for that is, think about what would happen if everyone with a gasoline-powered car went to the gas station now to fill up. Of course, the infrastructure can't support it. That's not what it's designed for. Mm-hmm. Electric vehicles are the same. People aren't all going to charge at the same time. And with these incentive prices we set up, we're trying to help incent people to charge in overnight hours whenever possible. And for most people, that makes sense because most people aren't driving 400 miles in their car on a daily basis. Okay, you're driving to school, you're driving to work, you're driving back to school, you're driving to the grocery store, you're driving home. If you're like me, then you drive back to the grocery store to get what you forgot the first time.
You forgot the tavern.
Try to walk there or Uber, thank you. So when you look at, are there challenges? Yeah, but because it's new. Like any other new challenge, you have to build out the systems to support it. There are EV charging station developers out there. You go to some stores and some gas stations, you see them already. And they're no fools. I mean, what they'd like you to do is come, plug your car in, take a half hour, fill it however full you need to run to run around, do the rest of your errands. And oh, by the way, while you're there, why don't you come on in? We got some, snacks in here. We got some stuff we'd like to say. And that's great. We love seeing that. It's a great opportunistic relationship that they have. But from a power perspective, there has always, we have always had loads emerge in places where we didn't expect. People don't have to tell us. They're supposed to tell us if there's significant changes in loads. Sometimes that doesn't happen. We get it done. I mean, that's our tradition. That's our challenge. And we're talking before about how we try to talk with people. That's not just at the renewable generation level. We try to talk with people. We try to talk with communities, have a good relationship so we know what's going on, so we can plan our system and make sure we build it out when there are multiple EV charging stations built. Now, the Lincoln area is part of an EV charging corridor. That's the beneficiary of a rate we call the electric vehicle charging program, and we will help. What it does is it helps reduce the cost to extend our infrastructure to EV charging stations that build along this corridor. It's an obvious reason why. I mean, you got a couple of interstates here, and you're going to see a lot of traffic. And so to the extent that people can build charging stations, we have the program set up to try and help defray those costs. Then we also have programs set up to try and help motivate people when they go home to charge it at night, at off-peak times. The other thing, too, it's like the gas stations. If you get a gas station, that's economic activity for the area. So if you get an EV charging station in your area, people got to do something while their car is filling. So, get the revenue from the charging, and then, someone will set up a retail establishment near them. So, yeah, EVs are coming. I mean, electrification is coming for everything. And it's just a matter of trying to support it in a measured fashion, and really just help everyone achieve the goals of cutting down on the carbon emissions and getting to clean energy.
Mr. Millburg, in essence then, am I correct in saying that if you use turbine power or solar power on your place of property, that you actually are in competition with Ameren, or Ameren has lost an active customer? Maybe I should rephrase that. Am I correct in that?
No, you're not. I'm sorry. I hate to correct my host, but no.
Good. Well, that's why I wanted to be straightened out.
I appreciate that, yeah. And I think one of the best ways to think about Ameren is we're kind of like the FedEx and UPS, right? We don't care where you buy your power. We're going to, make sure that we deliver it to you, and that's where we make our money. We don't care where it gets delivered to either. So if you set up a solar facility or a wind facility at your house, you will get the benefits of that through your rates, but you're not in competition with this because you're generating electricity. We don't own generation plants. We divested of all three of the legacy companies that make up Ameren, Illinois. We all divested of our plants in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we haven't owned generation for years, for decades, literally. So if someone sets up a generation facility, that's not in competition to us. We just want to make sure that that generation facility has to be connected to the grid. Also, we don't know of anyone that has put solar or wind at their location and has cut the wire to our system, because night occurs, because February occurs. So there's times when they're going to need power off our grid. And so that's one of the balancing acts that we have to perform, is looking at saying, okay, how do we charge for our services to make sure that that wire that connects people's house or connects people's houses or businesses to the grid is well maintained and reliable and safe, so that even if you put solar or wind at your location, and you want to generate your own power, that's great. We want that to happen, but we also want to make sure that when you rely on our system, when it gets cold, when the wind stops blowing, when it's nighttime and it's, like it gets around here, 20 degrees below zero, that power supply comes from our system and is there for you. So that's the balancing act of how do you transition from charges based on the number of kilowatt hours you use to something that's different. Is it more of a fixed charge, something like that says that wire doesn't change. So how do we recover the cost for having that wire there connected to the grid? So that's really the challenge we're looking at. But people installing generation, we have no problem with that. That's not a competition to us. We support that. It's just like with choice. We have third-party suppliers, some 30-odd third-party suppliers operating in our territory. We're fine with that. We're not in competition with that. We enable them to sell to our customers. So people setting up generation, we fully support that. It's not in competition to us. And that's one of the other things I want to make sure listeners know is whether you get power from a third-party supplier or you put solar or wind up, your lights go out, you call us. We're going to respond. It does not matter who you buy your power from. We own the wires. We're the ones who are going to take care of that. And I can assure you, none of our systems that are used to respond to outages have any indication of who they're buying their power from. The only time that we'll put an indication of is if there's solar or wind there is just so our people know that they can isolate that and keep themselves safe if they have to work on that section of line. That's the only reason we track where solar and wind is on our system. It's a safety issue for us. But yeah, it's not we support it fully.
Peter Millburg, furnished to us by virtue of Ameren. For a guy who had trouble with a slipstick in college, that was before computers. We did have things before computers. I find this very confusing this morning, and I hope this has been of information to you folks out there. Peter, we appreciate your taking your time. By the way, you got dressed up pretty nicely this morning.
This is my work uniform.
Yeah.
I'm old school.
Peter Millburg, and thanks, Marshall.